back, ladies and gents, to a new episode of the Morgue podcast. I'm your host, Tate Levels. Today we are checking out Jack the Ripper. Now, I know I said I'd have this episode up in a month or so, but I was like, hey, I might as well do it now. So basically, in the year 1888, in the district of Whitechapel, London, there was a series of murders. I already screwed up. A series of murders that terrified the citizens of Whitechapel, and he came to be known as Jack the Ripper. He was also known as the Leather Apron and the Whitechapel Murderer, as by contemporary journalist. These murders were very brutal. If you've seen some of the pics, they're extremely brutal, guys. I'm not gonna put them in the video. If you want, you can look up Jack the Ripper murder images, and it'll bring up I wouldn't say autopsies, but something similar to it. But it's just so graphic. So if you're gonna look it up, just viewer discretion. Because that's some gnarly stuff, man. Some gnarly stuff. All right, so there were 5 victims that we know, and they were called the canonical 5. I think that's how they pronounce it. I don't know. Remember, I'm 15. I suck at pronouncing words half the time. So if I screw something up, let me know in the comments. Also, I remember when I was talking about Scream yesterday in the welcoming episode. His name's not Luke, his name's Noah. I'm going to punch myself in the stomach for that. But his name's Noah. Noah. So, anyways, so the I believe the height and the point where the interest was peaked was from the From Hell letter that was received by George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. I can't speak. Also, guys, I'm gonna be getting a new mic. I don't know if I'm gonna be getting it in Christmas or if I'm gonna buy it late or before. But I'm gonna get a new mic, and it's gonna sound a lot better than this Xbox headset. It's gonna be a Blue Yeti Nano, I believe is what it's called. And yeah, it's gonna be lit, guys, because now you don't have to listen to this piece of crap mic. Anyways, so originally he was called they call him the Whitechapel Murderer, and then eventually, basically the Jack the Ripper name came from someone saying, "Hey, I'm Jack the Ripper." And it was posted in the media, and so that's where the Jack the Ripper part came from. Of course, there was always people saying Jill the Ripper and all that kind of stuff. And so basically, there were 5 victims in the first series of killings. I believe it's the only series of killings. Though in the article I'm reading, it does say that it went from that the date was 1888 to 1891, and they are called the canonical 5. And those include Marian Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. And their murders occurred from August 31st to November 9th, 1888. And these murders are often linked to each other because of how they were murdered, and just how they were murdered was how they were linked to Jack the Ripper. There are said that there have been more murders than just the canonical 5, but these are the only ones that were proven to be done by the Ripper, quote unquote. So like I said, this happened in Whitechapel, London, in England. If you don't know where London's at, look at your map, go to the UK, and then look for England, and or look for the UK. Look for London in the UK, and there you go. But basically, we don't know what drove this man to kill, but Whitechapel wasn't really the best side of London. It was, there's robbery, violence, and alcohol dependency were a commonplace. And poverty drove many women to prostitution, which I don't think I mentioned this, but every woman that was murdered in the Whitechapel murders was a prostitute. I don't think I mentioned that yet. I don't think I did, but now I have. Um, and estimates by the London's Metropolitan Police Service estimated there were 62 brothels, and 1,200 women working as prostitutes in Whitechapel. Um, there was anti-Semitic crime, racism, social disturbance, and just poverty, man, just poverty. Whitechapel was the notorious den of immorality. So you can think about that. And these grotesque murders attributed to the Jack the Ripper name that we all know, and I wouldn't say love, but we just all know because we know now. Um, there are 11 there were 11 separate murders stretching from the 3rd of April of 1888 to February 13th, 1891. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not that many murders. Um, at all. I mean, that's still too many murders if you think about it in the large respect, but when you think about murders, that doesn't seem like too many in 3 years, so I don't know, that could just be me. I hope that's not just me, because if that's just me, then I'm an evil person. But anyways, so the first person to be killed, which these are not part of the canonical 5, but the first 2 cases of the Whitechapel murder file are of Emma Elizabeth Smith and Martha Tabram, I believe, but they are not included in the canonical 5, like I stated earlier. Smith was robbed and sexually assaulted on Osborne Street on the 3rd of April, and a blunt object was inserted into her sexual organ, rupturing her how do you pronounce that word? Give me a sec. Basically, its lining of the abdomen cavity. Peritoneum. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, just let me know. I know I am. And she developed peritonitis. I don't know how to pronounce these guys. I don't know how to pronounce these words, guys. I'm sorry. I'm not a medical expert. And she died the following day at London Hospital. So, it is said that she was attacked by 2 or 3 men, one of them who was a teenager. And the attack was linked to later murders by the press. But that is not the best thing ever, That actually does suck. And then Tabram was murdered on the 7th of August, so not that long ago. But it is at the same time, considering it was October 29th. But she suffered, and get this, 39 stab wounds. I screwed that up again. 39 stab wounds. That's a lot, guys. That's a lot of stab wounds. But there's a lack of motive, and that's where the grisly parts link in. There's no clear motive of why these people were murdered. It's a lack of motive, and we don't know why he did it. I don't think we do anyways, because he was never caught. Though, the reason why this isn't part of the canonical murders is because none of these, they were stabbed, and rather than slashed in the throat and the abdomen. And many experts do not connect it with the later murders that happened. Because of the different wound pattern, and because Jack the Ripper, he'd slit the throat, cut the slit the abdomen, take stuff out that shouldn't be outside the body. But yeah, that's just how that's how the Ripper operated, man. Just evil, just pure evil. The canonical 5, as I stated, were Marianne Nichols, Anna Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Endows. I know I'm pronouncing her name wrong, and I am just so sad. And Mary Jane Kelly. Now, Nichols' body was discovered at around 3:40 on Friday of the 31st of August, of course 1888, in Buckrose, Whitechapel, which is now the Doran Street. I believe I'm pronouncing that right too. The throat was severed by 2 cuts. The lower part of the abdomen was partially ripped open by deep jagged wound. Several other incisions on the abdomen were caused by the same knife. I don't think we know where this knife is at, but I think we do. I'm not sure. Anyways, Chapman's body was discovered around 6 a.m. on Saturday, the 8th September 1888. And yes, I failed at doing an English accent, I know. Near a doorway of the backyard at 29th Hanbury Street, Spitalfields, I think. And Nichols had her throat, or Chapman had the same thing as Nichols' throat, and it was cut by 2 cuts. The abdomen was slashed entirely open, and it was later discovered that the uterus had been removed. I don't know about you, but that's pretty gnarly, man. And at the inquest, one witness described seeing Chapman at about 5:30 with a dark headband and shabby, genteel appearance. I don't know about you. No idea what that means. I know what shabby means. But yeah. Stride and Eddowes were also they were killed early morning on Sunday 30th September 1888. Stride's body was discovered around 1 a.m. in Dutfield's Yard off Burner Street, which is now called Herticule Street, I believe, and it's also in Whitechapel as well. And there's a picture that looks really gnarly. The cause of death was a clear-cut incision with several of the main arteries on the left side of the neck. Severed the main artery. I don't know how I said many arteries. Which severed the main artery on the left side of the neck. The absence of mutilation to the abdomen has led uncertainty about whether Stride's murder was contributed to what should be attributed to the Ripper, or whether he was interrupted during the attack. Witnesses said that they saw Stride with a man earlier that night, but gave no offering descriptions. Some say he was shabby dressed, others said he was well dressed. Eddowes' body was found in Market Square, the city of London, 3/4 of an hour after Stride's. The throat was severed and the abdomen was ripped open by a long, deep, jagged wound. The left kidney and the major part of the uterus had been removed. A local man named Joseph Loudon had passed through the square with 2 friends shortly before the murder, and he described seeing a fair-haired man in shabby appearance with the woman who may have been Eddowes. His companions were unable to confirm his description. Eddowes and Stride's murders were later called the double event. Part of Eddowes' bloodied apron was found at the entrance of the tenement in Galswood Street, Whitechapel. Basically, it was meant to, or some writing on the wall above the apron became known as the Gustille Street graffito. It seemed to implicate a Jew or Jews, but it was unclear whether the graffito was written by the murderer as he dropped the apron piece or was merely incidental. And we know that these serial killers, they're pretty smart, so I don't think this was incidental. Maybe it was, I don't know. But they feared that it might spark an anti-Semitic riot. Police Commissioner, anyways, Charles Warren, thought that. Kelly's, and I think now we're moving on to Mary Jane Kelly. This one is, I would say, the most graphic one. Her mutilated and disemboweled body was discovered lying on the bed in the single room where she lived at 13 Miller's Court off Dorset Street, Splattenfield, at 10:45 on Friday the 9th of November 1888. Her throat had been severed down to the spine and the abdomen almost emptied of its organs. The heart was missing. I know I've been, talking pretty, I guess, funnily in all of these, but I mean, the actuality is these people did die, and it's very sad, to be honest with you. It's very sad. I don't know why I went really quiet, I guess, on that one, or really serious. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know why I went at that beginning with a joking mind. I guess I was trying to keep it interesting. But, I mean, yeah, that was my Discord. But, if you heard it. But that was extremely graphic. And honestly, for the people who went to see that, they probably haven't seen that in a long time, so that I can see how that would shock someone, because, yeah. The canonical five murders were perpetrated at night and on or close to the weekend, and it was either at the end of the month or a week or so after the month. and the mutilations, if you couldn't tell, became more and more um, in their severity as the murders proceeded, except for Stride. A lot of people say that the attacker was interrupted. Nichols wasn't missing any organs, and Chapman's uterus was taken. Um, Eddowes had her uterus and kidney removed and her face mutilated. Now, and Kelly's body was eviscerated and her face hacked away. Though only her heart was missing from the crime scene, which I guess if you want to say a silver lining, but that's just brutal, man. Like, this, so brutal. Historically, these 5 crimes, or it's the belief that these 5 crimes were derived from the contemporary documents that link them together to the exclusion of others. Do I know what that means? No. Am I reading from a Wikipedia article? Maybe. Of course, I was reading word for word on the murders because I wanted to get it, as close as I could. Now, for the people who did it, there's a lot of people who they thought did these murders. They were all... So basically, there were a lot of people that were, said these murders were by these people. Some said they were by these people. But there were later Whitechapel murders. I don't know why I said murderers. Murders. Wow, that is... Holy crap, that's... Wow. Okay, so Kelly is generally considered to be the final of the Ripper murders, which, thank God. And it is assumed that the crimes ended because of the culprit's death, imprisonment, immigration, or institutionalization. Meaning, if I've read that right, he was put in an institution, which weren't always the best at this time, but it could have been worse. And there's another 4 murders that happened after the Canonical 5. Those are Rose Milet, Alice McKenzie, the Pitchin Street torso, yes, that's how it sounds, and France Coles. Milet was found strangled in Clark's Yard, High Street, Poplar, on the 20th of December. Yeah, of course, 1888. There was no sign of struggle, and the police believe that she had accidentally hanged herself on her collar while in a drunken stupor or committed suicide. Nevertheless, the inquest jury returned a verdict of murder. Mackenzie was killed on July 17th, 1889, by the severance of the left carotid artery, which is somewhere in your neck. Or no, it's in your head. A head and neck. Several minor bruises and cuts were found on the body, discovered on Castle Alley, Whitechapel. Yeah, and this person named Thomas Bond believed this to be a Ripper murderer. Though his colleague disagreed because he kind of examined 3 of the previous victims, so he said no. The Pitchin Street torso was a headless and legless torso of an unidentified woman found under the railway arch of Pitchin Street, Whitechapel, on the 10th of September 1889. It seems probably that the murder was committed elsewhere and that parts of the dismembered body were dispersed or disposed. And Coles was killed under a different railway arch in Swallow Garden. This murder took place on February 13th, 1891, so not the same day, but it was 3 days after. Oh, no, it wasn't. 3 days and 3 years after, and a couple months. I screwed that up completely. Her throat was cut, but her body was not mutilated. And James Thomas Sadler was arrested by police as they saw her with him earlier, and was charged with murder. Yeah. He was briefly thought to be the Ripper as well, and though he was discharged from court for lack of evidence on the 3rd of March, 1891. In addition to the 11 Whitechapel murders, commentators have linked other attacks to the Ripper in the case of Fairy Faye, in which is unclear whether the attack was real or fabricated or as part of the Ripper lore. Fairy Faye was given to a nickname allegedly found on 26th of December 1887 after a stake had been thrust through her abdomen. but there were no record murders in Whitechapel around Christmas 1887, or at around Christmas 1887. Fairy Face seems to have been created though a confused press reported the murder of Emma Elizabeth Smith, who had a stick or a blunt object shoved into her sexual organ. Now I'm saying that because you know which word I'm probably talking about, but I'm going to say that to stay scientifical. Why do I try to be scientifical? And my voice is starting to get raspy, so. Okay, I'm good now. Okay, there we go. And many authors agree that the victim, Fairy Faye, never existed. Anna Midwood was admitted to Whitechapel Workhouse Infirmary with stab wounds in her leg and lower torso on the 25th of February, 1888. She was discharged but died from apparently natural causes, age 38, on March 31st, 1888. Let's see. Another was Ada Wilson, who reportedly survived being stabbed twice in the neck on the March 28th. And Anna Farmer resided at the same lodging house as Martha Tabor and reported an attack on November 21st, 1888. She had a superficial cut on her throat, but it was possibly self-inflicted. And the Whitehall mystery, I don't know why I'm screwing up on so many words, was a term coined for the discovery of the headless torso of a woman on the 2nd of October 1888. So not too long ago, if you want to look at it in days. Years, oh my gosh, that's a long time ago. It's over 100 years ago. The basement of the new Metropolitan Police headquarters that were being built in Whitehill. An arm belonging to the body was previously discovered floating in the river Thames near Pimlico, and one of the legs was subsequently discovered buried near where the torso was found. The other limbs, head, and the rest of the body were never recovered, and the body was never identified. And the mutilations are similar to the one of the Pickle Street case. Yeah, a lot of gnarly stuff, and this one, John Gill, a 7-year-old boy, was found murdered in Manningham, Bradford, on the 29th of December, 1888. His legs had been severed, his abdomen open, his intestines drawn out, and his heart and one ear removed. They thought the Ripper killed him because of the similarities between the murder of Mary Kelly. The press speculated the Ripper had killed him. The boy's employer, milkman William Barrett, was arrested twice for murder, but was released due to insufficient evidence, and no one else was prosecuted for that murder. There's a lot of... This is really deep stuff, guys. Like, honestly, there's a lot of stuff. There's another one, Carrie Brown, her nickname was Shakespeare, was strangled with clothing and mutilated with a knife on the 24th of April, 1891 in New York City. Her body was found with a large tear through her groin area and superficial cuts on her legs and back. No organs were removed from the scene, though an ovary was found upon the bed, either purposely removed or unintentionally dislodged. At the time the murder was compared to those in Whitechapel, though the Metropolitan Police eventually ruled out any connection. Now, after all those murders, and I think there's one that I skipped over too, but after all of those murders, we get to the investigation part, which honestly is probably everyone's favorite part. A lot of people were thought to have been the Ripper. Butchers, slaughterers, surgeons, and physicians were suspected because of the manner of mutilation. Which honestly makes a lot of sense if you think about it. But of course, everyone who was thought to be the murderer either died or was put in a mental hospital. And we'll be right back after the break. And we are back after a super long break. The break was more like 2 days actually. I started filming on or recording on 10/29, I think, is when I started, and now it's Halloween. Um, so yeah, uh, now I'll put that at the beginning of the episode. But anyways, so now we are going down to the suspect because I believe that's where we left off last time. It was with suspects. So I think I said this before. I don't think I did. The concentration of the killings were around weekends or public holidays, within a few streets of each other, and have indicated that the Ripper may have been a regular or was regularly employed and lived locally. Others thought maybe he was an educated upperclassman, such as a doctor or aristocrat. I think that's how you pronounce that. Aristocrat. Yes, that's actually kind of cool if you think about. Yeah. So for suspects, it was either a doctor, because they thought butchers, doctors, and surgeons. I don't know the last name, I forgot it. And surgeons. And the reason why is because, like I said, in the murders, they were very dark and graphic, and you needed a surgeon to do that because there's a lot of stuff normal people couldn't do. And a lot of that stuff is what normal people wouldn't do. But of course, Jack the Ripper, he was good at his craft. I know that's weird to say for a murderer, but he was good at his craft. But there's a lot of people about who did it, and why did it, but we might probably never know. Now, there were hundreds of letters that were claimed to be written by Jack the Ripper. Over hundreds, probably thousands of letters to be written by him, or her. Who even knows who it is? It. But three of these are prominent. There's three particular ones that are prominent, and that's the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jackie letter, and the From Hell letter. Now, if you want to look those up, I'll have those in the description below, if you want to look at that. But it is really, really good. Or not, good, but you get what I mean. It's different from our letters, like reading some of the language, you're like, what does that mean? But the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jackie letter had the same amount of handwriting. The handwriting was similar, but the From Hell letter was completely different. And from the two images I'm looking at on these letters, oh yeah, they look completely different. Because I believe if I have a tab open, let me see, the Dear Boss letter, oh yeah, that handwriting is completely different from the From Hell letter. For sure. But I'll have these letters in the description below if you want to read them and read them for yourself. But they're really, really weird. And there's another one called the Open Shaw letter. There's 4 of them. There's Dear Boss, Saucy Jackie, From Hell, and the Open Shaw. Only one of these is a postcard, and that's the Saucy Jackie one. A lot of stuff's really interesting though. And with most murders, the media was like, "Hey, we should make this popular." So I can imagine, someone was writing stuff down with a pen, like just writing stuff down, be like, "Jack the Ripper strikes again. Murder twice as gruesome," or something like that. Something just like that. But of course, another one. The name Jack was already used to describe another fabled London attacker. But I bet you didn't know that. That's a fun fact. So they called him the Leather Apron because Spring-Heeled Jack supposedly leaped over to strike at his victims and escape as quickly as he could, or as he came. And that's why they called him the Leather Apron. But there is one that I am going to do later. This is for sure. And it's called the Axemen of New Orleans. I think I might make that my next one. But I actually read this as a comic. And honestly, I loved it, to be honest with you. Like, it was probably my favorite graphic comic. And he has quite a bit of victims. I think the Axeman had 12 victims, if I'm reading that right. But it was really good. And honestly, I might do that on the next episode. After Jack the Ripper, I'll do the Axemen of New Orleans. So, that's just a look at stuff to come, even though I probably shouldn't have, but oh well. And so, there's a lot of people for killers. There's the Axemen of New Orleans, Boston Strangler, Beltway Sniper. Um, Examples that derive from Jack the Ripper would be the French Ripper, the Dusseldorf Ripper, the Camden Ripper, the Blackout Ripper, Jack the Stripper, that's weird, the Yorkshire Ripper, and the Rostov Ripper. And they just, I don't know. But the media's always got it, and they were like, let's do this. And so, yeah. And like I mentioned before, they called him the Leather Apron. So, they liked calling him the Leather Apron, let's just say that. You know, they're like, ooh, he murdered people, let's say, let's get that loud, obnoxious pin-clicking noise. The Leather Apron, yeah, that's gonna work for media. Views! And, you know, all the, the media, man, sometimes. But the legacy of the murders is that it was just so weird, guys. Like, honestly, there's a lot to do with Jack the Ripper. Like, it drew attention. The victims drew attention to the poor living conditions in the East End and galvanized public opinion against the overcrowded, unsanitary slums. Oh man. And the legend of the Ripper is still promoted by guided tours of the murder site. But yeah, and then in 2015, the Jack the Ripper Museum opened in East London. So if you want, you can go there. That seems actually pretty cool to go to if you really want to. But when you think of Jack the Ripper, you think of Jack the Ripper. That made no sense, to be honest with you. But when you think of him, you think of a tall guy, mustache, black, nice black suit, or not really butcher knife, but like a really delicate, I wouldn't say scab, but like a scabbard, but something bigger than that. Like a bigger blade and stuff. That's what I imagine when I see Jack the Ripper. But for DNA, there points exclusively to two different subjects, and the methodology of both have been criticized. But there has been, they've been trying to attempt to find who the killer was, Jack the Jack. But they can't, because forensics they really didn't exist. It did a little bit, maybe, but the lack of surviving forensic evidence, just lack of it. There's just nothing left for forensics to find and be like, oh, this person did it. So, from now on, until we get better with forensics and stuff, it's better than we are now. We can't find out who did this, and we probably never will. And as I like to say, some things are just better unsolved than they are solved. And it's pretty weird, but it's just some things are better left unsolved. And this may be one of them, this may be not, for the families, or the great-great-grandchildren of these women, if they had any, if they, had kids. They probably didn't. Saying that they were prostitutes, but I don't know. This case may be better unsolved. But I know that raises a lot of questions, like why should it remain unsolved? And that's the answer that I just cannot provide for y'all. Why we just need to leave it unsolved, because it's just going to be on our mind. Who was Jack the Ripper? Man, I wonder who was Jack the Ripper. It's just, we're probably never going to find out who Jack the Ripper was. We probably never will. And that sucks for some people, because they're like, ooh, I'm going to find out who he is. So they get their loud pen click, and they're like, Jack the Ripper is, and then they'll underline it 18 times, close the pen, drop it, and then they'll go around, they'll get their pencil to write down suspect names, and then they'll finally come up with the answer. They'll be like, it was so-and-so. Then they'll circle it. And then they'll bring the evidence to the police, and just says it just doesn't line up. Then they'll go back to the drawing board and try to figure out who it was. But that is really it, to be honest with you guys. There's not a lot, because we don't know who he is, who he was. We just probably will never find out. I know that sucks for a lot of you guys. You guys are like, will he tell us who Jack the Ripper is? No. I was not born in 1888, nor was I alive in 1888, so that is an answer I cannot provide for you. Anyways, I hope you have enjoyed this podcast episode of Over Jack the Ripper. Again, like I said, I'm your host, Taylor Loves. Thank you for joining us, and I will see you in the next episode. Goodbye.